everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about the possibility of another American Civil War as well as the inevitable foreign invasion that would follow it. Now, if you like videos about SHTF, prepping, and survivalism, please hit the subscribe button below. It helps the channel and I really appreciate your support. So, is another American Civil War on its way? A lot of people think that it is, and the reason for that is that there's a huge political divide in this country right now, to the point where people just cannot agree on things. And we're at a 50-50 dichotomy where everybody has their opinion and they can't be changed by the other side of the argument. Now, most of us in the survival and preparation community tend to be on the more conservative side as well as on a libertarian mindset where we tend to want to be left alone, mind our own business, and let other people do what they will that makes them happy and let them mind their business as well. Unfortunately, most people in this country want to force their opinion on the other person next to them. So that's causing a lot of turmoil and a lot of strife, and it's causing a lot of people to feel like they don't have a way out. And sometimes politics get involved and fuel those flames because they want those people to get out, vote, and be motivated to try to keep them in power. But unfortunately, those flames eventually boil over the side of the fire and start causing problems that we can't come back from. And once there's things like riots and violence and things like that we're seeing over in Hong Kong right now, it's really hard to come back from that. When you see France with their Yellow Vest movement, you see Hong Kong trying to develop democracy, peace, and freedom, we're not there yet. But if we get there, it's going to be a lot worse than what we're even seeing right now from those countries. Our population is so divided, and the people who are on each side of that argument are very, very sure of themselves. They're very particular about the way they think about things, how things should be ran, and exactly who their leaders should be. And we're at a very dangerous point right now where we have an election coming up with a very divisive figure at the top of this election that a lot of people can't decide on. And either way, if you like or hate the person, you're going to be unhappy one way or the other. So if half the country's unhappy and the other half of the country is, that starts to cause a lot of problems. When the country's more united, things are more productive, we have a much better society and a much better economy, and there's less to complain about. Unfortunately, that's not really where we're at right now. And when this conflict starts to develop, it's going to be hard to curtail it and to make it come back to the table and sit down and have negotiations. Now, do I think a violent confrontation within our borders is possible in the near future? I do, but that's only because of the rhetoric and the mainstream media stoking the flames of what some would call revolution and others would call traitorous activity, and causing those people to feel like they're justified in acting that way. When you see groups like Antifa or the Proud Boys or these fringe elements of extremists who want to go out there and cause problems versus finding solutions, that only makes things worse. And when you get more and more examples of videos on YouTube and online of people being treated poorly and being assaulted for believing in one political ideology or another, it causes a lot of problems. And we are at a point right now where you can't go out and talk about your political beliefs in a free way without being censored one way or another, whether or not it's from a shadow ban or if it's from somebody threatening you with violence, or people showing up to your house and protesting and causing a scene, for your entire neighborhood to see, and for your workplace to have to decide whether or not you're a valuable member of the team or not. If you're going to cause hostility, even if it's not your fault, you could be, fired or let go. So when people get pushed to that point, when people get pushed to the very edge, and they say, look, your ideology or your political group is the reason why I lost my job, or the reason why my car got vandalized, or the reason why my house was set fire, it starts to want people, or to make people want to get back at those people one way or the other. And I, for one, am not advocating or pushing for any kind of a civil conflict. I want to make that very clear. I don't want a civil war. But do I think something like that is very possible here in the near future? I do. We are in a really bad spot right now where the average person is very uneducated and they're not listening to quality sources of information. Instead, they're just eating up the propaganda that's being fed to them on a daily basis. And people in Hollywood and in the media are sitting there and trying to get these people so angry and so upset about certain current events or people that they dislike, to the point where they're starting to act violently and they're starting to act sporadically. And that's a very good indicator of things going south. And we all know that it doesn't take a lot for society to collapse. Once it does, it doesn't come back very easily. Now, The other side of this equation that as preppers and survivalists you should really be thinking about is that there almost has never been a civil war in any country in modern history that hasn't led to a foreign invasion of some kind. Foreign countries want what you have. They just do. There's resources and there's power involved when you get to take over a country, or at least be involved with the rebuilding or restructuring of that country's government. Think about countries like Libya, where we went in and decided that the governing body there didn't need to be there anymore. Think about Iraq. We went in there, changed the governing body. We now have a say in how those places are ran. Whether or not you believe it or the CIA wants to tell you about it, that's how things are working right now. And that is what a lot of these other countries are going to do. So Syria is a great example right now. Syria had a civil war to start with. It started as a civil war. The people were tired of al-Assad basically, enforcing his way on them through violence and power. And of course, we went in, stoked the flames, because that's what some of our officials in government have decided to do over the years. And they started a civil war. Now we have a lot of new movements going on in that country. But to start, Russia showed up to Syria and said, we're here to help. So a foreign invasion doesn't have to look like an invasion. Sometimes it can just be a helping hand. And Russia went in there and established themselves as Syria's buddy. And now they're there, and they're going to be involved with Syria pretty much for, inevitability. And we're also seeing now that we left Syria, Turkey is invading. This country had a civil war, and they've already had multiple foreign entities, including Russia, ourselves, and now Turkey, basically coming into their borders and changing their landscape and forcing political will and military might upon the people of the country. And that's not because they chose that to happen. When Syria's civil war started, they weren't like, hey, everybody, come here, we're having a party. They basically had their own civil conflict they were trying to deal with, and next thing you know, all these superpowers and foreign powers start showing up. And now Turkey, which I believe is a NATO nation, has decided to enter Syria to operate militarily, which is the way they want to say it versus an invasion, because that's making them look bad. But anytime a foreign country comes in with their military through your borders, that's an invasion. So don't forget that, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Now, America had the same thing happen in the Revolutionary War. When we had our first Revolutionary War, the only one to date, but you never know when another one might happen, the colonies asked for foreign intervention to get some help. So America asked for France's help, because France had interest in basically ruining whatever Great Britain's plans were. So the French came in, helped us win the revolution, and got stock in the company by doing so. So the French came in, found an opportunity to have more power and more of a footprint in North America, and also kind of, swing one at Britain and say, haha, this is what we always wanted. We just needed these farmers and colonists to help us kind of get a win over here against this giant superpower of Great Britain. So even America has asked for foreign intervention when it's come to these civil conflicts, because technically the American Revolution was a civil conflict. We were British colonies. We decided we didn't want to be British colonies anymore, and we basically started what could be seen from some people's eyes as almost a civil war, because it was a country that decided it was its own country being ran by another country that was fighting each other. So France came in, the French got what they wanted, and the Great Britain lost the battle, and now France is happy because, they've got stock in America. Well, that's the same thing that's happening in Syria. That's the same thing that's happened anywhere in the world where a civil war has happened. So as a survivalist and prepper, you need to go ahead and think about the fact that a foreign invasion, it could be a very, very possible concept if a civil war breaks out in our country. And if a civil war is likely to happen, as if you search Civil War II or Civil War in America or Civil War 2020 in YouTube or Google or anywhere else online, you'll find a ton of search results for different videos and articles of people who honestly believe that that's where we're headed. And if that's the case, you have to also assume we are headed for a foreign invasion one way or the other. So if, let's say, the dichotomy of civil war in this country is left versus right, which most of us would assume it would be, well, if the left says, hey, China, we need your help, come help us out. We believe in a lot of the things you guys believe in, and I think we could have a good partnership after this war if you just make sure we win. that could be a huge problem because China would love to come over here militarily, especially with an invite, and say, yeah, no problem. We'll go ahead and help you out. Just as long as we own about 50% of the country afterward, no big deal. You got our weapons, you got our troops, we'll help you out. And the same thing could happen to the right. If the right reaches out to the allies that they have around the world, of more conservative countries out there, which are very few at this point, it's still a foreign invasion if those people come over and help us out. And then you also have the threat of the UN or mercenaries being involved, and who knows what else. But a civil war in America is a huge opportunity for another foreign entity to say, we'll be right there. And when they come in, it's basically Red Dawn, except half the country's on their side too. And that's a really bad spot for us to be in. And if you want to prepare for all possibilities, and especially ones that could lead to violence and conflict and unrest to the point where there's no going back, please consider this a real possibility. We just saw it in Syria. Turkey decided to go in there because we left. And there's no one to stop them, except maybe Russia, which could cause some serious issues. But we'll see what happens there. I'm not going to go ahead and try to predict that. But let's just remember, Russia and Syria are still in a partnership, and Russia didn't go anywhere. We did. So Turkey, as a NATO nation, suddenly decides to go in there. Well, if they're being the aggressor and Russia's established and has to defend Syria, which is their ally, from this NATO aggressor, do we consider that an attack on a NATO ally? I don't know. You let me know what you think in the comments below. But I will say, if the Civil War in America 2020 or 2030 or 2050 or whenever you think it's going to happen actually occurs, which a lot of people think it will, then are we on track for a foreign invasion? And the answer is probably yes. I mean, there's barely ever been a civil war where a foreign entity hasn't gotten involved one way or the other. And in fact, if you want to look at foreign entities as someone who's involved right now in stoking the flames of a possible civil war, think about people around the world like George Soros, who likes to fund groups like Antifa to try to stir things up and make things a little more interesting, okay? So, that's all happening right now. If we go into civil war, which is possible, especially with this terrible 50-50 split we have right now, because a lot of people are uninformed and not logical about their thoughts, then we're going to have a bigger problem when a country like China or Russia decides to get involved. And I would say those two are the most likely perpetrators of a foreign invasion in the sense of a civil war in this country. And in fact, if they are invested enough in the idea of having power and military might within America, then why would they not try to invest in the idea of a civil war? So they might even be behind some of these groups or funding some of these groups that are causing the divide and the contention in our country right now. So please, as preppers and survivalists, try to plan for that being a real possibility. Make sure you have all your prep stored away and make sure that you have a plan in case there is a military conflict within our borders. Whether or not you think there's going to be one or not, it's still a good thing to prepare for. And at the same time, please remember that we're all Americans. And try your best to reach out to the people who might not agree with you ideologically, but at the same time, let them know that you still care about them as people. We care about each other in this country, and as Americans, we try really hard to get along. But unfortunately, a lot of people have pushed us all to the point where it's going to be very difficult to do. And if somebody like Beto O'Rourke gets his way and tries to come around and take everybody's firearms and stuff like that, then this country is going to go down the wrong path really quickly. Because there's a lot of us out there, especially in this community, who are going to say no to things like that. And once enough people say no, that's when conflict happens. And if that's where we're at, that's where we're at. But beware for China, Russia, or somebody else to show up and say, don't worry, we're here. And that's all I wanted to talk about today. So that's going to be it for Magic Prep.